where we explore the depths of the Black Library.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to Iron and Ceramite present Librarius Omnis. My name is John, and as always on these shows, I'm joined by Shane. How you doing, mate?
I'm all good, thank you. All good. Good to be here.
Good. Looking forward to this one?
I am. Yeah. I'm very much looking forward to this one. So as I say that for every book we've done, for different reasons, of course. I think as we were just speaking about just before we started recording, it's enjoyable for very different reasons to some of the other books in the Heresy. This is much more of a action-packed romp than maybe the heavyweight tomes that we've been used to dealing with. And you know, we'll obviously, I think we should touch on it, is that obviously this particular book gets maybe a little bit of criticism in some circles and corners of the fandom, and that's fine. It's not going to be for everyone, and I think maybe it's because it, you know, as I said, a lot of the characters don't go on to do anything. You know, it could be that, you know, the whole story is just more of a MacGuffins that you could fit these, you know, a bit of bolter porn, a bit of chainsaw porn into a story, but at the same time it's fun. It moves quite quickly. It's a bit action packed. I like the fact that you get a nice spread of characters. Obviously, for me being a Space Wolves player, I enjoy the fact that it's got a good Wolf Guard turn in there with some blood claws. So it's nice to read about them in a bit more detail. But I also like the fact that you've got you know, it touches on the Saturnine fleet with the character Admiral Kaminska and her role, and she really, we'll come into it a bit, but she's a really nice character because she does stand toe to toe against the Ultramarine Astartes in this, which is interesting because they definitely live up to the Ultramarine characteristics. And again, maybe some criticism there from some corners of the fandom in terms of the boys in blue, but you know, I think they were handled quite well in this one. But then what is also nice as well is we have several, you know, main characters who are from what will become known as the traitor legions, which are, you know, traitorous legions at this point, but these Marines don't know it, and that creates quite an interesting dynamic, which is really interesting and plays out really well. So there's multiple reasons why this is an enjoyable read for me, and probably doesn't deserve some of the criticism it gets, just because I think you take it for what it is, which is, you know, a quick, enjoyable, pulpy action book set in the time of the Heresy. But that's my stance on it.
Yeah, and I see. Obviously, this is almost, apart from one more book, that's the limit of my Heresy knowledge. But I remember when I first read it, and I thought this was really, really good. And a lot of people were saying, well, it doesn't mean anything. It's not very good. It's too cheesy. It's too silly. But it like you say, it's a fun book. It is a cheesy 80s action movie in a book. It's got some, like you said, great action. But one of my favorite things is, I think they're more towards the end, so we won't get to it in this episode, but there's some amazing one-liners through this during action scenes, like proper Arnie or Sly one-liners.
I think there's one, I remember it in the last, as I said, we might not get to it, but it was literally, I think it is taken directly from Predator.
Really?
Yeah, I think if it bleeds, we can kill it. And I've heard it word for word in this book, and was like, yeah, okay, I'm fine with that. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and like you said as well, not everyone likes all these books. Obviously, Dark Angels had its criticisms for being, or Descent of Angels for being a bit slow, a bit disjointed, and this one, it doesn't connect to anything, but it does bring us back from obviously Legion, which is probably just before the Heresy. This brings us back to probably the end of, or around the events of Fulgrim. So it should bring us back up to speed. And I've just realised we've gone 6 minutes and we haven't actually said that we're talking about Battle for the Abyss. So there we go. If you had, well, you should already know because you clicked on the title, but anyway, there we go. So I think we've got a lot to cover. Unless there's anything else, shall we dive straight in?
Yeah. Let's. We've done our preamble. Let's go for it.
So as you can see in Shane's background, gives us actually really prefer your background to the actual book cover because it looks really good.
It's so I always try and find it. Side note, always try and find it for our Librarius Omnis. Is the expanded artwork, because all of the covers. So it's the same cover. It's just this is the expanded landscape version, so you get to see a little bit more of the detail. And it's it's a great piece of artwork, as are the majority of the covers in the Heresy series. But again, it's nice. You see right up front, you've got your Ultramarine with his bolt pistol, and then you can see a bit more detail, obviously, behind him. You've got, which I think it might be a World Eater behind him in his Heresy armor, which would be the white. And I'm just putting up based on the red chainsword, but that's an aside. That's an aside. It's a nice cover.
Yeah,
it's a good bit of it highlights the action that we're going to see.
And as always, well, as recently anyway, I've prepared our little cheat sheet so we can remember names as we're going through. So that will help us out definitely. So
absolutely,
we're going to get introduced to pretty much everybody as we go through. Like we said, Ultramarines, some word bearers, a little bit from the Mechanicum, some Space Wolves, Thousand Sun, World Eaters, and the Sat9 fleet. So we will begin at the very beginning. And chapter 1, and another aside before we actually get into it. So this one, rather than Legion, where we were getting sort of time frames, they've just given chapter numbers and then sort of snippets of, they're like cryptic clues to what the chapter is going to be about. Yeah, which is a nice little touch, I think. Especially if you go back afterwards and look at it and go, oh yeah, I see where that came from now. Yeah. But they're on the screen, and obviously for those listening, so chapter 1 is split into 3: Bearers of the Word, Let's Slip Our Cloaks, and the Death of Cruifne. There you go. Yeah, that'll do. Cool. So, chapter 1. We begin on the forged world of Mars in the heart of Olympus Mons. Among the factories there are thousands of adepts going about their daily business, and a indiscreet drone rises out of the smog and launches itself into space from Mars towards Jupiter. An orbiting Jupiter, as we all know, are a number of moons, but the one we're interested here is called Fool. It has been orbiting Jupiter for 6 million millennia, and the gravity is so weak that the moon has become misshapen, and it's sort of forgotten about on the probably outer atmosphere, I guess. And the Mechanicum have been working there on a secret task because it no longer functions as a moon. It is now a space station, and inside the crust of the moon, there is a large gathering of Astartes, 1,000 men, a full chapter divided into companies of 100. And at its head, Fleet Captain Zadkiel is standing, and through a Vox amplifier, he is given a sermon telling his men that they are on the brink of a brand new era. A red dawn is rising. It will drown our enemies in blood. Heed the power of the word, and know it is our destiny. So he's given his sermon to a whole chapter of word bearers. They've discarded their old grey granite armor and dumped that into the volcano, and now are wearing their new heresy style crimson ceramite armor covered with the etchings of the word of Lorgar. So the only dealings we've had with the word bearers so far is one friendly chap who everybody likes, who has spread the word of Lorgar through the lodges of various chapters, and has been our sort of precursor to potentially the first openly traitorous legion. But that's Erebus, who will not be appearing in this film. No. We get their intentions very quickly and what's going on and what this secret mission is. As Zadkiel says, we have our lance of vengeance. Let us strike out at Gilliman and his weakling legion. Long have we waited for retribution, and long have we dwelt in the shadows. And they are going to cast off the falsehoods and shackles of our feigned obedience, and let slip our cloaks and reveal our true glory. And essentially, he's given a really impassioned speech, if you haven't guessed already, that the word bearers are on their way to wipe out the Ultramarines and Gilliman himself.
Yeah.
And
I was going to say, side note, for those that know the lore and know what's coming ahead, and John, we will get there when we get to these books as well. Obviously, the animosity that the word bearers feel for Gilliman and his legion of Ultramarines does become clear. We get the understanding of it. All we understand right now, though, is that they've got a real... We're not really told why. We don't really understand why it's particularly Gilliman and the Ultramarines that are being picked by the word bearers, but they are very much the focal point of this lance of retribution.
Yeah. And Zadkiel is like, so he's our first character we're going to follow through this book, and he is a proper villain, like from the 80s, in a true style of he's like obviously pure evil, over arrogant the whole way through this. And he's just very... He's always banging his fist and shouting, like here he's banging his fist and shouting and making a big scene. And then all throughout this book, anything that goes wrong, he's just seething at everybody around him. Yeah.
He's a career bad guy, and he's always looking at, despite the fact they're his men, anyone that shows any kind of, spirit or potential or ambition, he's finding ways to make sure they're not a threat to him.
Well, he's really bipolar in a way, because, like you say, anybody who's a bit keen and willing to serve the word and do what he says, in the back of his mind, he's like, I've got to get rid of you.
Yeah.
And then anybody, he's like, you're too keen. But then anybody who's like, I don't agree with you, like I don't like this, or a bit cautious, he just thinks of them as lazy or scared or weak. Like I don't know if there's anybody in this book that he likes.
No, I don't think there is.
No.
I don't think there is.
So we'll get to more of his weirdness as we go through. So he is smashing his gauntlets against the podium, screaming and shouting about how they're going to destroy the Ultramarines. And behind them, as they go out into a cavern, he reveals a brand new warship. And this is not just a warship, it's completely beyond anything that anybody has seen so far in the Imperium. It's the biggest, it's absolutely covered in cannons, laser batteries, torpedo bays. It's been designed to withstand anything you can throw at it and dish out ultimate devastation. And at its figurehead is a massive ornate book wreathed in flames with words of Lorgar, chosen by Lorgar himself, engraved in massive letters on this book. And seeing it, even Zadkiel's breath is taken away. And he says, our spear is made ready, the Furious Abyss, which is the name of the ship. Let's wield it, death to the false emperor. So officially, like I say, let's slip our cloaks. We know what they're doing now. We've got their intentions. And this ship has been forged in complete secrecy, hence why they've hollowed out this moon on Jupiter. And they've not done, the word bearers haven't done this alone. They've had some help from the adepts of the Mechanicum. And present here, we have Magos Epsilon and the Fabricator General himself, Keebler Howe, have come out, and they're watching Kelbor Howe. They're watching the sermon, and the Magos, he's trying to understand the passion that the Marines have, because obviously we haven't really touched too much on the Mechanicum so far, and we will in the next book. They're more machine than human, and they've stripped away most of what made them human in the first place. So I think they're probably so old they've sort of forgotten emotion as well. I don't know if like any of these are like built as robots. They were all human at one point.
Correct.
Gave themselves over to the machine god, didn't they?
Yeah, they've augmented themselves with various bits and pieces over the many years to, expand their lifespan, replace broken parts, so on and so forth, and various. They still have an organic brain, but it's accessed in a very computerized fashion.
Yeah. So he's just trying to figure it out, and Kebler Howe sort of explains like they're still just human. They love the beauty, but we prefer how it functions.
Yeah.
And we'll see a bit more of him in the next book. But he is the boss of the Mechanicum. Like he's in charge of Mars. He's head honcho, I guess. Is that right?
Yeah, he's exactly that. He is the fabricator general, and that position, has been around for a while. So it's a fairly consistent thing in the Imperium, and it's like the effectively think of like the High Lords of Terror. This role would be equivalent of that, and it's like where Mars exists as like a is allowed to exist as a separate entity within the Imperium. That is the leader of that the Adeptus Mechanicus, because obviously Mars is their home, as it were. So it's very powerful. And as I said, it's classed as a High Lord of Terror. And obviously, not to go into it in more detail, but as you said, he's a very important figure throughout the heresy, as someone at that level would be.
Yeah. And we quickly find out now that he's already turned traitor. He's sided with Horus. The promise was that this will bring him a step closer to being one with the Omnissiah, which is something that the Emperor has forbidden. But Horus is going to embrace it, and logically rather than emotionally, the Fabricator General has said, yeah, this is it. It didn't take him very long to change his mind or make up his mind. And he basically came on this trip to the moon of Jupiter to feign a generic inspection, but really it was just to come and see the finishing touches of this monster ship. And he watches the Marines board the Furious Abyss and watches the engines come to life, and he gives the signal, and the other Magos activate the launch sequence and watch the ship rise into space. And even in one moment, he feels some human emotion in his body of like awe at this thing that they've created. Sometime later, once he's seen the ship off, he jumps on board his own transport and heads off back to Mars. And as he leaves, the drone that we previously mentioned arrives, weaves its way through the loading bay, along some corridors and down into the sort of depths of the work bay. And the Magos Epsilon, who was left in charge to clear up, is just cracking on as normal. And then suddenly the drone detonates, causing a huge fireball to erupt, spreading fire throughout all the work chambers, incinerating everyone and anything that was inside the moon. And basically, the moon is destroyed, but it will not be noticed until it's too late. However, there was much technology on this moon that will be lost forever, but it was the will of the Fabricator General and a necessary act.
Indeed, small enough to not be noticed and to be covered up, as it were. Like a potential accident. But as you said, its true purpose was to exactly that, cover up any of the evidence and tracks, as it were, of the creation of this ship, so that by the time it's revealed. By the time it's revealed as what it is, and anyone decides they're going to try and find out where it's come from, it's going to be too late, because then the treachery has been unveiled anyway.
And a bit savage, even all these traitor, well, I don't know if they know they were traitor. They built this machine. But
They probably didn't.
Everyone who's worked on it's dead.
Yeah.
So whether they were traitors or they were just doing a job.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, right? It's like, you know, the same as like, there's a side tangent, but if you've ever seen Clerks by Kevin Smith, there's but there's a bit in it where one of the characters makes the point that in Star Wars, the plumbers and builders that were working on the Death Star, they were just working for the government, and then they got blown up by a load of rebels. Like,
could you imagine being like that janitor who's like, he's just a human there, he's just sweeping up some crap or whatever, and he just hears Zadkiel saying, "We're going to go fuck up the Ultramarines." Just like, what?
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's just, what? No, it must be joking.
Yeah. Just a bit of banter.
Yeah, I think, especially with the Mechanicum, I think in this instance, I would say that a lot of them probably didn't even have a clue. They're just building, right? They're just doing what they're told. They're, you know, that even those that are not like automatons, they're you know, majors and stuff like that. Even then, I don't think they know. They're just doing the will of the Fabricator General, and he's asked them to build this big ship, and they're like, "Cool, let's build a big ship because that's what we do best."
Yeah.
And why would they know? You know, they don't know what the word bearers are going to do with it, and then even if they do go, as you said, like they're like, what Ultramarines? Then, you know, then it's too late anyway. But I don't think they knew. I think it's just one of those things.
Yeah. Well, gutted. Let's move on. I think there's a lot of that going to happen in this book as well.
I think you might be right.
So, chapter 2, Hector's Fate, Brothers of Ultramar, and in the Lair of the Wolf. The wolf. There you go. So now we're going to meet Brother Captain Hector.
Yeah.
And if you have a very quick memory, Hector's Fate is one of the titles, so it's going to go well for him. He is at the end of a strenuous training session. He and 500 Ultramarines are on their way back home to Ultramar after winning a battle against an alien race called the Vectates of Arcanath. And they freed a enslaved human population, and their ship is the Fist of Macragge.
Yeah.
It was damaged during battle, but is now repaired, and they're summoned home to regroup. Warmaster's given orders for the Ultramarines to take the fight to a system near the Ultramarines' home system that's been invaded by orcs. And Gilliman himself has ordered all Ultramarines to muster at Calf to count their strength, take on supplies, and go fight some greenskins.
Yeah.
Hector has one detour to make. He needs to go to the Vangelis spaceport to pick up some battle brothers for finishing the journey. So he's on a Lunar class battleship. It's not the biggest ship going in 40k, but it's still pretty decent.
Yeah, it's a good ship.
Yeah. He goes up to the bridge, says hello to the Helm Master. He's a human with a robotic arm and an augmented eye, as the result of a skirmish during the last battle. So Hector settles in, sits down in the command throne, starts asking how long it's going to be till they get there. And as they're just sort of settling into the final stint, a proximity alarm goes off, confusing everyone because they should be alone in real space, is where they are now. And looking on whatever sort of radar they have, they're getting a massive reading that no one recognises. And he's demanding to know how something so big got so close without being detected by any of them, and demands to see what it is. So the blast shields come up, and he sees the biggest ship he's ever seen. And the way they describe it is like a long blade with 3 massive decks that spear out like prongs on a trident.
Yeah.
Intense red lights coming from the ship flare against the Fist of Macragge. And too late, Hector realizes this massive ship is firing at them. And too late, cries out for the shields to be raised. A series of impacts cause like the computers to explode. People getting Star Trek flicked all over the place. and all sorts of things are exploding. He calls for the shields to be raised, turns around and sees that his helmsman's already dead.
Yeah.
The surviving crew scramble to get the power lances and shields online, but they realise like this is the end. So Hector calls for the astropath, and a crewmate says, "Are we sending for a distress call for help?" And Hector says, "They're beyond help. We need to send a warning."
Yeah.
And meanwhile, on Space Station Vangelis, brother Captain Cestus is meditating in one of the sanctums, which has been given to his men as accommodation while they await their transport. He's been away with 9 of his brothers, acting as an honor guard for an imperial dignitary, and they've been separated from the Legion. The mission's over, and now they're waiting. They've been there for about a month, waiting to go home and back to the Legion. I'm looking forward to going back and getting back amongst the Great Crusade. And so a little bit to put us in the timeline. He is aware that Horus is currently heading to Istaban 3 to quell a rebellion there. And he's jealous that the Death Guard, the Emperor's Children, and the World Eaters have been directed to join the War Master. And if you don't know what we're talking about, go back to the first episode and work your way up, and you'll know what we're talking about, and know why he probably should be glad not to be going. Although, so meditating's interrupted by his battle brothers. Antigus comes in and gets them to. So we need to muster in preparation for the arrival of the Fist of Macragge. As they're walking towards the dock, they turn a corner and a human remembrancer comes the other way and runs straight into him. Antigus is outraged, but Cestus tells him to chill out. It was an accident, and asks him what's wrong. And the remembrancer tells him he was trying to take notes of another person's heroic deeds when a madness took him, so he fled. He points at another muster hall, and Cestus, he already knows who's in there. It's the son of Russ. And Antigus groans, but they go in to investigate, and inside is Captain Bringar Strumdreng, or Strumdreng. Sturmdreng. There you go. And he is well and truly on the beers, isn't he?
He is. Yeah, he's doing what Space Wolves do best when they're at the downtime. They're drinking their specially brewed beer that gets Space Marines drunk, because they're not able to get drunk normally, so it's a particularly foul concoction. And he's necking it down to take the edge off while he puts some blood claws through their paces. Yeah.
As the Ultramarines walk in, he is smacking them about and having the time of his life, and they're trying to obviously get one up on their captain, but he's just knocking them down as quick as they're coming at him.
Yeah.
And he laughs as he hits them, saying, "They hit like they're from Macragge." And a voice in the doorway says, "Is that so?" And Bringar's delighted to see the new challenge. They tell him that they think he's had enough, but he's not convinced and starts throwing chairs at them. And they manage to dodge it. Cestus gets up and sees too late that the Space Wolf was charging at him. And he tells his mate to stand back, who's more than happy not to get involved because he don't want to lower himself to these tribal ways. And Cestus steps up, bashes the Space Wolf's arm, and grabs him and flips him over onto his back. But Brignar catches himself and punches him, and they have a bit of a friendly squabble, really. Cestus gets the better of him and smashes him into the remaining beer barrels, which just completely soak him in wolf's mead. And then, being friendly, he helps him up, and they have a bit of a hug and good to see you again, because they've been on a few battles in the past.
Yeah, we realise at this point that they know each other quite well, and so they're, as I said, it's you realise with the hindsight of that kind of insight, or with that learning, that actually it was more friendly sparring than any kind of malicious intent.
Yeah. And they said like they fought together a few times, and Bringar actually saved him once, and it cost him an eye for his troubles. And his axe, Felltooth, is made from the beast that he killed the day that he saved Cestus. And then he asks Cestus if he wants to go another round, but they decline and say they're about to leave and go rejoin the Legion. So Bringar decides to go and see them off, leaving all his battered blood claws licking their wounds. And that pushes us into chapter 3. God of the Furious Abyss, Psychic Scream, and Visions of Home. So the three Astartes arrive on the main dock, and the remaining Ultramarines are already there waiting for them to muster. And banner bearer Saphrax is talking to the station master called Falkman, and he tells Cestus that the astropaths on deck have received a message. They're trying to decipher the message as it came through, but it came through as a psychic cry with no meaning. Feels like it was a death cry, but they can't figure out what's going on. And also worrying is that they haven't heard a word from the Fist of McCrag, which is worrying too. And I think we'll get more into it later on as well. But I just wanted to bring up that I don't know if we've really gone into it too much, but being an astropath sounds awful.
Oh, it's horrible, right?
Yeah. So they're like people that have got a natural mutation of a bit of they can sort of read what's going on in the warp, but you get locked into like a little room if you're lucky, or worse, you're hooked up to some machines, and then you're in a weird state when you are transcribing messages. It's even if it's like someone saying hello, how are you? It's extremely painful, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so they're normally astropathic choirs, as they call them, because they're not, as I said, they don't send, even as you said in that example there, they can't say, hi, how are you?
Yeah.
It might be like, right, we're going to try and do this with visions. So it might be like, like they've got to put through some sort of vision that someone else on another ship can receive and try and interpret to be good or bad.
Yeah.
Incredibly difficult to do, as you can imagine, which is why they have the astropathic choirs. So they have more than one signaler and more than one receiver, so that hopefully between all of that information they can make a consistent message. But yeah, none of it's fun. And in this particular instance, obviously it's the message that comes through, or the psychic message warning that's come through is like ambiguous signals. They're not sure, or symbols. They're not sure what it all means.
Yeah.
And because the astropathic choir was at a point of rapid demise because of the Furious Abyss, it's not a controlled message. It's effectively like a psychic backlash.
Yeah.
Like a short circuit. So it's funneling this huge amount of psychic energy in a very unrefined way into another set of astropaths, and so that causes problems.
Yeah. So the ones on this dock, there's 2 males and a female, and they're like in a pit in the floor, wrapped in some weird translucent blanket. And they're all blind and left in the dark pit where they seek out and send messages, but they're just writhing in pain constantly while they're working, hooked up to a bunch of wires, and the messages that they can translate get fed into a computer which deciphers what they're seeing. And whilst the others are talking, suddenly, like the astropaths down there start going completely mad, screaming out in agony. Blood starts splattering up onto this translucent cover, and smoke comes out of the hole, and the computers start like going haywire, spitting out data, trying to work out and make sense of what's going on. And these guys scream so loudly that the lights in the dock go out and the power goes down. So if I developed any sort of psychic ability and lived in that time, I'd keep it to myself, because it's just, no thanks. That's not the job for me. So on board the Furious Abyss, Zadkiel is on the bridge, which isn't really a bridge the way it's described. It's like a city in itself. And he sort of sits on this oversized throne, looking down into like the pits where all the menial workers are, which would normally be a bridge, but it's so big, there's so much going on. And he's just sort of propped up on his own platform. And he's got 3 warriors with him that he's talking to, pledging their allegiance to him. The tallest is called Balanos. He's sort of Zadkiel's personal right hand terror weapon. The way he's described, he's big, brooding, unimaginative, and the perfect follower and underling for Zadkiel. Also present is Ikphalon. He's the chaplain, a master torturer, and there's already a bit of tension brewing between him and Zadkiel. And when they're talking, Ikphalon's very sarcastic when he calls him his brother. And then the third man, Rezkiel, states that the Fist of Macragge was destroyed in the assault. Rezkiel was much younger than the others, but he's still a veteran. But in Astarte's eyes, he's still a young up-and-comer. So officially, Balanos is the number 2, but he's more of a lapdog. And Rezkiel ensures that he knows all the secrets and goings on and feeds them back to his master. So they're sort of his right-hand men. And Zadkiel says the attack was as expected, and the chaplain then is quick to sort of rain on his parade, stating that the astropaths detected that the Fist was able to send out a distress message, and he would hate for all their caution and secrecy to be undone at the first hurdle, which immediately Zadkiel sort of notes in the back of his mind, this guy just won't give him a break. He sort of considers smashing his skull with his power mace, but decides against it because he does value him at this moment, even if he doesn't like him. So he says, it doesn't matter, no one could stop him anyway. We're good to go. And he dismisses the men. He then jumps onto his pick screen, contacts the engine room, and he's watching like the human menials at work, dressed in the new colours of the word bearers. And like was mentioned before, so he's taking some pleasure knowing that these workers have absolutely no idea what the purpose of the mission is. They don't even know that they're working for a traitor legion. They're just getting on with business. And he tells the Magos in charge to keep a steady speed and be prepared to speed up if needed. And then he flips over and to the weapons docks and speaks to Weapon Master Malforian, who's another veteran whose lower jaw has been replaced with a metal sheet due to a previous encounter with some orcs. And he gives him orders to prepare weapons, as you do, all the sort of admin stuff done. And once he's done, he uses his keypad, raises his throne up from the current position, so he goes high above the rest of the dock, where he can look out at all the view screens and out into real space, and tells his main navigator, take us to Macragge. And meanwhile, back on Vangelis on the Corralis dock, the warning lights and sirens are still going off. The astropaths are writhing around in agony, screaming and spitting blood. And the station master, who's actually synced up to the control stations, has wires into his head, and he's trying to rip them out because of the pain. But Bringar, he stops him and says, "You've got a job to do. Don't care if it hurts. You're going to stop this going into a meltdown and do your job properly." And he says, "Look, the reactor needs to be shut down, otherwise this dock's going to destabilize and explode." So Cestus orders Saphrax to stay here and monitor things, and take some of his men and bring guard down to the reactor core. So Falkman is able to give him directions to the right way, and passes out due to shock before he can actually tell him how to shut things down. And normally the reactor would have menials working away, but the alarms went off and radiation was released, killing a few and sending others dying. And as the Space Marines are walking through, there's a few people laying there, begging for a bit of help, but they just walk past them because they're not important.
Yep, other important things to be doing.
Yeah, so these unlucky, like, thanks for your time, but you're just going to die of radiation poisoning. And they get to the reactor breakthrough, which is getting into full meltdown, and he asks the others to give him all the crack grenades they have, and he's going to go in and prime the chamber with explosives and blow it up before it can, and bury it before it can blow them up. The others are worried that it will cause like too much damage, but at least it won't destroy them.
Yep.
And he's just about to throw in his grenades, but suddenly the reactor collapses like an imploding black hole, and replaced by a glowing sphere of purple energy. Purple light shoots out, blinding everybody. And in the haze, Cestus sees an image on his optic screen. And once everything's died down and the other reactors on the space station start calming down, it all still self-stabilized, and no one needed to blow anything up. And Bringar and the other Ultramarines are shocked at what they saw. And Cestus asked if they saw the same thing in the blast flare. And they say, well, what do you mean? And he says, well, I saw McCrag. And no one really mentions it after that. I think it's just Cestus is the only one who sort of had that vision.
Well, he has the vision, and he says it immediately afterwards. And as you said, he doesn't mention it again because he's obviously at this point the edict of Nicaea has gone through, which again for the lore heads out there, you know what that means. Again, in the heresy, we'll come to learn what that is in due course. Mm-hmm. But it's effectively the point where psychic powers, the librarians, things like that, are said, no, stop doing that, pack that in, we don't like that anymore. And so Cestus is obviously, you know, he's worried that actually what he's seen is some sort of psychic vision. And so, you know, I think a lot of the other Marines kind of let it off as, you know, he's just seen a massive weird purple explosion, so we'll let that slide. And it's just like, you know, something in the heat of battle, whereas Cestus himself knows that it was more than that. It was a proper vision of things, but he's got to keep it quiet because he doesn't want to be like chastised or called out by, you know, his fellow Marines, probably particularly a Wolf Guard, who's naturally suspicious of psychers anyway.
Yeah. So that moves us on to chapter 4, and that is divine inspiration, a gathering, and contact. And now we're going to move over to the private sanctum of Brother Sergeant Motep of the Thousand Suns, who is with his blind serf Calamar, who brings him the important news that they have now docked at the Vangelis docks. Calamar asks them why they're here. They were supposed to be going back to Prospero, and Motep gives him a cryptic answer saying the paths of destiny are very curious. So his serf just accepts it and carries on. And Motep, he finishes his medication, gets up, puts his rune-encrusted staff back into its case and back into storage. So the Ultramarines gather on the main muster hall on Vangelis, and have asked any other Astartes on board to turn up. They're disappointed to see quite a low turnout because they'd sent word for everyone to come, but Cestus is actually quite happy because he expected no one to turn up. So when they arrive, already at the table are Bringar of the Space Wolves, who he already knew, and two others they did not know, 1,000 Sun and one World Eater. Bringar is already sworn to assist the Ultramarines and has helped spread the message, but he had hoped that they wouldn't include the Thousand Sun because they do not get along, as you mentioned. But Cestus said we need every available soul and was very keen to have the extra help. And Motep's obviously got his own ship, which will bolster the fleet that he's trying to muster. And although Motep doesn't give the best first impression, he's very aloof and dismissive about what's going on, and sort of sits there just raising eyebrows when people are talking, I think.
He's very highly sort of thinks of himself quite highly. That's the opinion you get.
Yeah. So Cestus brings the group up to speed with the events so far, but leaves out mention of his vision because he thinks people will be suspicious. And Ultramarines are not famous for their superstition. They're very logical and meticulous. The World Eater, called Skrull, suggests that it could have been an Orc Hulk. And he is the exact typical image of a World Eater. His armor is completely scarred, bodged together, and rusty in places, and his face is completely is just as damaged as his tatty armor from all his fights. Cestus agrees it's a possibility. It was an Orc Hulk, but nonetheless, an enemy ship has attacked and destroyed a ship full of Astartes, and they need to hunt them down and discover what's happened. Again, avoiding mentioning the vision, but he does mention that he believes that because that ship was targeted, that the enemy will now head to Macragge, and he wants to take a fleet out to where the Fist was destroyed and start the hunt from there. No one's keen on the idea, and he says that, look, I don't need anyone to help. I'm already in the process of commandeering a ship. I'm going to hunt down the enemy that's killed 500 of my battle brothers, but I'm asking that you help. And in a gesture of humility, he steps back from the table and takes a bow to sort of win them over. And Tejas is aghast at what he's seeing, but he follows Cestus' lead and does the same. And then the other Ultramarines all show the same act of humility and bow. And as a reward, Bringar stands immediately and pledges him and his men to an honor debt. Skrull stands and pledges the fury of the World Eaters to his cause. And Motep sort of plays a bit of a game and just waits for Bringar to ask him. And then with a bit of, I suppose, some sort of joy, he goes, yeah, all right, I'll join you too. And Bringar's quite suspicious and says, all right, so why are you coming? And Motep says that after the events of Nicaea, there is a distrust in the direction to the Thousand Suns, and I want to improve relations, and this seems like a great place to start.
Yep.
So Cestus says, meet me on deck in an hour, gather your men, and we'll go from there. And as you mentioned right at the beginning, the ship that Cestus commandeered is called the Raffle and is part of the Saturnine fleet. So if you want to tell us about the fleet, mate.
Yeah, I can briefly talk about the Saturnine fleets. The Saturnine fleet is so it predates the Great Crusade. So it was part of, or it was active during the Age of Strife. And as the name would suggest, being Saturnine, it was located mainly around Saturn and the moons and rings of said area, Saturn rings. But in that sort of neck of the woods, and is well known for its strong, I say naval, but in this sense naval traditions, upbringings, and practice, with some members of the fleet, all being void-born and proud of it. So always existing in the void, never having been planet side, and so it's quite a storied, strong naval fleet, and is very proud of its heritage, and it was allowed to continue as such under the Imperium, as long as they obviously sort of sided with the Emperor and continued to add their strength to his and their kind of their naval abilities. So, as to give you a few, they're like they're very proud naval officers, and they're very confident in their abilities, but rightfully so. They've been battle proven. They've been proven ship-to-ship combat, for centuries, and so they're very much prized as, tactically astute and an asset to have in the field of battle, especially when it comes to naval assault. So that's the Saturnine fleet. That's what they are. We'll touch onto it a bit more later on in the book, because that becomes important as to the admiral we're going to get introduced to very shortly, and her ship, and why, even though she's maybe slightly reluctant to begin with, kind of grows into this quest more and more as it goes on.
Yeah. So the ship is commanded by Rear Admiral Kaminska, and she says to her sisters, "It's an honour to have these starters aboard," but really she's less than pleased that they've commandeered her ship. They only came to the port to take on repairs, supplies, replace some crew, get some R&R, but that's been completely shut down. She doesn't resent serving the Astartes, but she's heard the plan and she's not quite convinced that it's the right path. They're chasing a ghost based on little to no evidence, and actually says this as much to Cestus. But he thinks of telling her off, but then she sort of saves herself, say that actually we've got another ship who's volunteered, Captain Vorlov of the Boundless. He's going to come with us. So yeah, they've got an extra ship there, and with that set, they set off towards the last known location of the Fist. And also in the view screens, we can see that there are 4 escort ships following along: the Fearless, the Ferox, the Fireblade, and the Ferocious. And as well as that, you've got Motep's ship, the Waning Moon.
Waning
Moon, I mean.
But Wanning sounds much better.
Waning, yeah, the Waning Moon.
Waning.
And behind that, you've got the Boundless taking up the rear. She has questions about the mission, but she's going to keep them to herself because she knows she'll find out soon enough. And after not too long, they arrive at the coordinates given by Cestus, and they can detect an energy trail. No immediate evidence of wreckage, but there is a faint signal that belonged to the Fist left behind. And they're also able to pick up faint plasma energy signals from something enormous. And although it's fate, they decide, right, we're going to follow it and find out what this is. So back aboard the Furious Abyss, Zadkiel is leading a large group of novices for a sermon, preaching the word of Lorgar. And they're basically inside a massive cathedral, one of a few, I think, that's within this ship. And essentially they're standing in the exact thing that the Emperor has forbidden all this time, completely decorated in the words of Lorgar. And they are going to turn their faith into a weapon. And he basically says things like brotherhood is power is his main message of this sermon. And one of the novices, Altis, sort of says, brother can turn on brother, so where is the power? And Zadkiel tells him that the power comes from sibling rivalry, and the brother who can outdo the other proves himself to be the victor. And the debate sort of goes on between them. Altis questions Zadkiel's teachings. It's sort of, in Zadkiel's mind, he's challenging him. But I think in Altis's mind, he's trying to understand the message.
He wants to know. He wants to understand the word and follow it more closely.
I don't think he's being a dick. I think he wants to study, like genuinely wants to study. But Zadkiel's like, you're either too ambitious or you're undermining me. You can't decide what, so he doesn't like him anyway.
Yeah, exactly that. The big mistake here was asking questions.
And essentially, like Zadkiel's saying that the Emperor, he's a coward. We're going to war with each other because he's hiding away in the dungeons, allowing weak people like Malcador to run terror. He's shunned any form of brotherhood because he's left us and gone home. So again, daddy issues. spearing deep into this legion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So while he's giving the sermon, one of the helmsmen arrives and tells Zadkiel that there is a fleet of ships tracking them. And this really sort of pisses on his parade here. He dismisses the novices, and this helmsman tells him that they're a small fleet, but they will outmatch us on speed. They'll catch us before we reach Macragge.
Yeah.
Do you want us to increase speed? But Zadkiel says, no, we'll just carry on. No, they can't touch us. So when the helmsman leaves, Altis steps out of the shadows and asking to further understand the word of Lorgar, stating that by dividing the Primarchs, they'll be able to take power away from the Emperor and defeat him. And like we said, Zadkiel sort of writes Altis's name down on his diary, basically.
Yeah.
And that's the end of them for now. So we go back over to the raffle. The Ultramarines are gathered in a training pit, and they're watching two of the World Eaters spar. And although their sparring is no different, well, their sparring is no different to a fight to the death in their eyes. They've already cut each other to shreds.
Yeah.
They're still going at it. And Antija says that they're far too angry, and he sort of feels ill at ease with them on board because of their reputation. And another Marine, Festor, says, why do we even bother bringing them? It's none of their business, and they're as good as savages. And Cestus snaps because these guys have come to help him. And he chastises him for being too narrow-minded. They still are battle brothers. The Emperor saw fit to have them conquer the galaxy in his name. They're no lower than us. They're different. And thoughts like those will break the bonds of brotherhood. And he basically kicks Festor out in shame. And Tejas sort of backs down and says, I agree, but I still think they're a bit savage. So Cestus asks him what he thinks about the Space Wolves.
Yeah.
And Tejas said, look, I fought with the Space Wolves. I know they're not noble warriors, but we kill for the sake of it. But we don't kill for the sake of it. The World Eaters do. We kill for necessity. And Cestus says, look, we all kill for the Emperor, and that's the last I want to hear about it. And they keep watching the fighting, and privately, Cestus doesn't actually approve of the World Eaters, but he knows that it's a necessary evil to have someone that he doesn't necessarily trust with him. And to prove his point, one of the World Eaters nearly cuts the other one's arm off. He's worked with them, I think, before. He's because they're even things that have happened with the Primarchs sort of reflect in just the Legion themselves, because he's uncomfortable with them because Gilliman and Angon have a bit of beef because of a particularly bloody slaughter from an earlier campaign, which has sort of tarnished the World Eaters' names. But Cestus doesn't want to bring it up with Skrout because he wants him on his side.
Yeah, it's a weird. It's definitely a weird dynamic. As I said, you see, it all transpire down. My dad's bigger than your dad. Well, my dad's got a better job than yours. So on and so forth, and that's played out with the Marines and their Primarchs. I think Cestus is quite a good character, really, because although he's an Ultramarine, he's not like an Ultramarine in that he's letting loads of stuff, not loads of stuff, but he lets stuff slide or takes the more, I don't know,
He's diplomatic, isn't he?
Yeah, he takes a better view, a more humanistic view on it. He is very much because there's few unmodified humans in this story. Yeah. He's almost taking that kind of balanced view for us.
Yeah.
And he's the one that's conflicted, and he's trying to find balance and understanding the differences between his battle brothers and the 20 World Eaters that they've got on board. Obviously formerly the Warhounds. They're unsure of them because normally it's a legion that they battle on their own because they do, they don't take prisoners, they don't muck around, they tend to be a little bit over eager when it comes to comes to the actual hand-to-hand combat, and so that makes, you know, especially Ultramarines, who are very tactical, precise, and, you know, they don't overindulge. They will do what needs to be done and no more.
Yeah.
It's very difficult for them to see other chapters, and even, as I said, even the Bringar, it's a really good point, and also calls into the point I think we talked about it in the last pod as well, that, you know, the Space Wolves and the then Warhounds were very similar in terms of Legion identity. In fact, even the Warhounds being, you know, of higher acclaim, in terms of honor and you know, battle honors, until their Primarchs were discovered, and then they kind of interchanged places. And it's kind of interesting that you know, that whole dynamic playing out between the Ultramarines and the World Eaters as almost counter cultures, with the same goal, but going about it in incredibly different ways.
Yeah. It's like the rumor mill, isn't it? Like, they've all heard stories, and it sort of becomes gospel to them, even if, like, they haven't necessarily worked with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we sort of get a bit of a head count here. We've got 50 Astartes, we've got 20 World Eaters, as you said, 20 Space Wolves, Bringar and his Blood Claws, Motep, and 9 Ultramarines looking for this unknown enemy. And it is going to kick off pretty quickly. So the Ultramarines are still sort of watching the fight, and Cestus is sort of looking a bit troubled. And Antiochus asks him, like, what are you thinking about? And Cestus says, I'm thinking about what I saw in the reactor. And he says, look, something I saw tells me that we need to go to Macragge. I saw a golden book and laurels, which looks like Macragge to me, and I saw Macragge itself. And Antiochus warns him and says, look, these visions border on witchery, and you need to remember the Edict of Nicaea. And before they can continue this conversation, they're interrupted over the Vox and are told that they've made visual contact with the other ship from the site of the destruction of the Fist. So they make their way up to the bridge, and they are absolutely stunned by what they see. Like, it's clearly a Legion ship, but it's like nothing anybody's ever seen before, and no one can comprehend that this is what's responsible for firing. This is clearly an Astarte ship. Like, it can't be it. They've obviously done their scans, and the reports show that it's clearly a ship of Mechanicum design. It's covered in the markings of the word bearers, and all we know from previous, and all that these guys currently know, is brother does not kill brother. Astartes does not kill Astartes. So for us, it's quite obvious. Well, we know what's happened. We saw it. But this is like beyond their comprehension at the minute. And this thing, so the Furious Abyss is 3 times the size of the Raffle, and would dwarf even an Emperor class battleship. So chills are going down their spines. Even like Cestus and Kaminska, who are pretty battle hardened. But the most disturbing aspect for Cestus is this gigantic golden book being displayed on the front of the ship,
which he definitely didn't see in his vision.
No. So Captain Vorlov on the Boundless tells them that we're just within engagement range. Cestus tells him to hold back. These are our Legion brothers. They can account for themselves, and they may have news on what happened. So he puts everyone on standby, but tells them to be prepared. He intends to howl the ship and speak with the brothers, and Bringar suggests sneaking up and firing into the underbelly of the ship. Shoot first, ask questions later, but Cestus insists on speaking first. The comms link open. Cestus demands, in the name of the Emperor of Mankind, that this ship states its business. Nothing. He repeats the order, but still nothing. And Antiochus asks, since when did the sons of Lorgar fail to acknowledge the Ultramarines? And Sisters, hoping for something, suggests that maybe their long-range Vox is damaged. So he sends out a frigate in order to get closer and attempt to establish a comms link. He thinks if it takes the battle cruiser in, they'll see it as a threat, so we'll just send something small. And he wants to hope for the best and keep the peace.
Yep.
So Kaminska orders the Fearless to close in, and Motep offers to act an escort and go in with the Fearless. So he's got half a regiment of Prospero's Spire Guard on board with him. So if it comes to boarding action, he is equipped. Sisters accepts, but tells him to keep his distance. And they watch anxiously as the Fearless and the waning moon close in. And that will take us into chapter 5. Do you want to do one more chapter?
Yeah, let's do 5. Yeah, that makes sense.
Cool. So, chapter 5, a line is drawn, silver 3 down, and open book. So, on the Furious Abyss, we're on the ordnance deck, and they ask Zadkiel for orders, and he is absolutely relishing the power. He loves it. He can't wait to unleash on them. It takes a moment to consider his options. He has absolutely no interest in the little frigate, but the cruiser has his eye. Fast, well-armed, and designed for boarding, and clearly a ship of the Thousand Suns. And he's the scans have brought it back and identified it as the Waning Moon. It is a well-honoured ship from the fleet of Magnus. So Zadkiel was told that the ships are within range, and he tells his men to relax and enjoy the moment, and orders comms to be opened with the Thousand Suns. And once the connection is made on screen, he can see the bridge and he can see Motep himself. Zadkiel introduces himself, as does Motep, and Motep asks why you have ignored our hails. And Zadkiel counters him and demands to know why this show of force. Why are you threatening us? And tells Motep to disengage. You have no authority here. Motep ignores him, repeats his question, and says, "What do you know about this destroyed ship?" And Zadkiel says, "I don't know what you're talking about, mate." Motep doesn't believe him, strangely enough. And Zadkiel then smiles at him and says, "I will tell you the truth. Great deeds are unfolding. Lines will be drawn. Flame and retribution is coming, and those on the wrong side will be burned to ash." Zadkiel tries to sway Motep, tries to say, "Look, we're on a secured link. No one else can hear us. Lorgar and Magnus are brothers, and so are we."
Yeah.
Lorgar is a supporter of Magnus, and the events of Nicaea must rank all the Thousand Suns. What side of the line would you stand? And the reply, prepare to be boarded. And with that, Zadkiel gives the order to fire. A wave of torpedoes shoot towards the waning moon. Laser cannons hit the Fearless, blowing it to pieces. Cestus, I think, loses his mind here.
There's a lot of people that are just like, they cannot believe what they're seeing.
Yeah. Even shouting, "Throne of Terror." They see the Fearless go up in flames and cease to exist, and the rest of the torpedoes closing in on the waning moon. Motep gets comms with Cestus and says, "The Fearless is gone. We're taking fire." And Cestus gives the order to engage and destroy the Furious Abyss. So Kaminska asks for orders. Cestus pauses briefly. He's still shocked. He's given the order to attack, but I don't think he's ready. A short while ago, he was disciplining his men for slagging off the World Eaters, and now he's giving orders to attack the Word Bearers. Mm-hmm. Right. Other things that he's worried about: is this treachery widespread, or is it just this one ship, or is it the whole Legion?
Yeah.
The Mechanicum, what part did they have to play? What are we going to do? These are all questions that he's still worrying about. But for now, he orders them to break that ship in half. And let's get some telepathic warnings out to McCrag and to Terra. Let everyone know what's going on. So Kaminska dispatches escorts to Captain Vorlov and says, "You go and support the waning moon." engage the Abyss. And like Vorlov's well ready to go. He couldn't wait. He's in there. He's getting his the rest of his fleet up into battle. So everyone bursts into action. Bringar, he wants them to get close. He wants to take the Space Wolves on board, gut the traitors.
He just wants a boarding action. Get us close enough and we'll sort it out. And
Cestus says, look, mate, you'll get your chance. And Bringar roars, storms off, and goes and sulks towards the boarding torpedoes and says, don't make me wait too long. I think Cestus is quite glad that he goes because he's been like getting a bit too intense. He's too keen to spill blood of his brothers, which is a bit worrying. Although he's still glad to have him, but it's best not to have an angry wolf on your shoulder while you're trying to think.
It's not the best for tactical nous.
So Motep ships is able to avoid most of the initial assault and bear the brunt of anything that does hit. But 4 of the torpedoes actually managed to breach the outer hull, and these are another Mechanicum special. They start boring in, and then they split into like 6 smaller drilling missiles and bore their way right through until setting off like multiple huge explosions, which completely wipe out the gun decks, cooking anybody that was working down there. Setting off a chain reaction across the ship, like just killing as it goes. There were damage control crews stationed around the ship, ready to like put out fires or rescue anybody. But most of these are just evaporated before they didn't even know what's going on. Like these bombs that have gone in are just absolutely deadly. And Motep and the bridge crew are clinging on for dear life, taking on damage reports. But he tells Cestus, look, we're still here. We're not done just yet. The Furious Abyss changes course because it's taking heat now from the raffle, and Motep, who can still control the ship, maneuvers ready to attack and try and take it out. Apart from that first volley, the Abyss actually hasn't fired anything. Zadkiel was just sort of enjoying watching everybody panic. He's like a kid with a magnifying glass burning ants at this point.
Yes, indeed. Probably a little bit overconfident.
Yeah, and it doesn't change at all.
No,
like,
it doesn't.
He's at this level of confidence, and I think he'll stay there till maybe the last page. And anyway, so he's like living a dream at the minute. And Rezkiel's like, look, we're taking fire. Let's fire back. And Zadkiel says, look, we can't be damaged. Don't worry about it. His sensors now show boarding ships are approaching. And they're all like, look, let's fire at them, let's fire at them. But Zadkiel says, look, believe in the word and just listen. Don't worry about it. So Captain Vorlov and the Boundless, the escort fighters sweep past Motep's ship, which is sort of spinning in place, firing wildly, but not doing too much. And Vorlov knows this as the spiral dance, the sad sight of a dying ship lashing out in its final moments. But he's escorting in 10 fighter ships. They're like a number of fighter ships, so they're 10-man assault vessels, and they're lined up in formation, and they're going to do a run alongside the Abyss, targeting the weak points, taking out any shield sensors and gun batteries. Remember the title? The pilot of Silver Free, Carnagan Frau, has selected his targets and he's given the order to fire. Guns move into position, but nothing happens. Captain looks around at his co-pilot Rugel, says, go down, check on the weapons bay, see what's going up. So Rugel gets up and pulls, and Frau turns to see that the ordnance officer, Cardina Skell, is stood on the deck with her auto pistol in her hand. Frau was about to ask her what was going on, but before he could, she shoots him straight in the face, turning it on Rugel, shooting him point blank in the chest. And before leaving the cockpit to finish her work, she says, it is written. Oh dear.
Indeed.
So, Silver Free is down, is the message given to Vorlov, who thinks nothing of it because ships always go down. He continues to monitor the progress and asks what returning fire they are receiving. And they're receiving no fire. So he's quite curious. So he's like, so what took down Silver 3? No one knows, but now they're getting odd reports from Gold 9. Volov orders the ship to return and for the crew to report anything else. But now Gold 9 is now down. There was small arms fire reported in the cockpit as well. Reports from Silver Prime stating they've lost control of the engine crew, and now they're getting various reports coming in. Someone's screaming they're bleeding out. Another that the engine officer is flooding out air of the ship. They're going to go down and try and shoot him. Another voice comes over just reciting verse, saying things like, I am the light that shines always. I am the Lord of the Dawn. I'm the beginning. I am the end. I am the word. Volov cannot believe what's going on. And his perfect attack run, tried and tested routine, has been ruined, and the enemy hasn't even fired a single shot. So he orders the retreat, tells them get back on board. So Mr. Smug, Zadkiel, he's basking in his glory, and the chaplain, Ickfallon, says that, yep, you were successful. The applicants did their job. And he says, look, leave the escort craft. Let's close in and open the book. And whilst they're waiting, he says, so that attack, how many applicants did we lose? And Ickfallon says, we only lost 3 weak ones. So Zadkiel's loving it. They can sit there, sustain a barrage for hours before anything would even breach them. And then even then, only a few like menials on the outskirts of the ship would be lost. So no problems here. They managed to intercept Vox from the Fireblade, and they hear that it's closing in ready for what they believe to be a final assault on the Abyss and a sneak attack. And now Vorlov is reporting his losses to Cestus. Only 20% of the fleet is returning from the failed assault. And Cestus says, I think that may have been a psychic attack. So he orders the Boundless to support the Fireblade on the assault on the Abyss. And the Fireblade, the Ferox, and the Ferocious are able to get in close, withstanding fire from the Abyss, causing some decent damage to the outer hull, but nothing critical. And the Waning Moon is critical, but still alive and firing relentlessly. And slowly, the large golden book on the prow of the Furious Abyss starts to creak open, revealing the massive bore of a gun. And slowly, plasma builds up in the chamber, blue flames lick out across the barrel, and suddenly a white hot beam of energy is released like a bullet. And the Furious was able to use his thrusters to dodge the beam. However, the Waning Moon took the hit, and explosions erupted all over it until only the rear third was torn from the ship and left floating. And that is the end of chapter 5.
Indeed.
Yeah. And that's the end of chapter 5, and we will end it there for this episode. So we'll look forward. So what we got next, we're going to result that battle and then see where we go from there and get into some more action. How do you enjoy that first part, mate?
Yeah, as I said, I enjoy. I do enjoy this book. I like some of the descriptions of the actual orbital, I suppose, space battle itself, because it's like, I think one of the descriptions that is used is like, it's almost like everything's in slow motion. So they can see at one point the torpedoes moving towards the Waning Moon, and like the Waning Moon isn't going anywhere, can't get out the way because it's all happening in slow motion. And so I quite liked how that's described. I like the slipperiness of the word bearers, like using effectively, applicants are, the low level psychers that they've got like tied up somewhere, and they're forcing them to do their will. Again, a bit like the astropaths. And so, making all of these fighters like lose their minds and turn on each other, I thought was a nice touch. I think that was good. They built up a really nice bad guy in Zadkiel. I think he's, as you said, a proper Bond villain. So, enjoying that quite a lot. with his various henchmen. And I think Cestus is, as I said, he's let's say he's the lead character, but he's very much more our eyes than anything else. So people would say, "Oh, there's not much to him," but it's because we're kind of watching everything through him.
Yeah.
And you get to see, like, you know, Antigua is the second in command. He's, you know, obviously very close to, and you know that's going to be some of the dynamics between the Marines and what's going to be quite interesting. So between Cestus and Bringar, between Bringar and Motep, between Skrull and whichever other Marines in the room, like there's some good stuff there. And so I think it's set itself up to be as a good launching on point for the middle section of the book, which we'll cover next. Yeah.
And I think it doesn't really slow down now. Like there was and it wasn't necessarily a slow build. We got all the intros, first bit of action, and then it's just now it is fight for survival now from now to the end. So we look forward to cracking on in the next episode.
Absolutely.
So, do you want to do this bit?
Yep, sure, of course. So where to find us, where to support us? Obviously, we're on Instagram at Iron and Ceramite, and you can use hashtag Iron and Ceramite to find us. Also, put it in your posts, and you know we'll promote you in our Insta stories. And also, it's just a good hashtag to follow generally because you'll see a lot of cool minis, a lot of good painting from various different factions. Painters, you know, and there's some good inspiration on there, as well as our own stuff, of course. Again, same on Facebook, search Iron and Ceramite, join our group as well, where again, we have a bit of chat back and forth, tips and tricks and stuff like that to help hobbying. Likewise, Twitter, at iCeramite or search Iron and Ceramite. Again, it's pretty obvious to find us. It's similar with YouTube, but you already know that because that's where you are now. So as always with that, hit the bell, subscribe, share to someone that you think might like it, because all of those, you know, everyone that listens to us, that watches us, it helps us, helps the algorithm, and just helps get more eyes on what we're doing. You can also, as I said, if you like podcasts, we're on Spotify, Apple, and all good podcast services. Again, search Iron and Ceramite. That tends to be the golden rule. Occasionally, John puts a bit of gameplay up on Twitch, again, on Iron and Ceramite, worth having a look at. I think the last run through was the classic Space Marine game, where, funnily enough, you do play as an Ultramarine, and an Ultramarine with a fair bit of character, so well worth a look. We are also on Patreon. Anything that you give there goes back into the channel. It is there to just help us make our content better. Whether that be eventually invested in mics, cameras, and maybe doing this in person one day around the table as opposed to just over Zoom as we're doing now. But we'll get there. But that's where all of that goes. And similarly, if you're into actually collecting the models, playing tabletop, we are an affiliate with Element Games. If you use our link, we get a little bit of kickback, and again, that goes straight into the channel. So check us out. Google Iron and Ceramite, search Iron and Ceramite everywhere. You'll find us. You'll find all of the other stuff that we do as well. And we appreciate any likes, subscribes, shares, and listens that you can send our way.
Yeah, cool. So, awesome. See you on the next episode, and we'll crack on with chapter 6.
Indeed.
As always, we would like to thank you for listening to our Iron and Ceramite podcast. If you liked us, then you can also find us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and any other good podcast services. Just remember, in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war.